Hi. Welcome to What's So Great About Shakespeare. I'm David Bishop, and this is What's So Great About Hamlet, Part 2. At the end of the first talk, we got to the end of the first scene, and Horatio and the soldiers were going off to find Hamlet to tell him that they had seen the ghost of his father walking on the platform at night. And as they disappear, we, the audience, get to Hamlet first because the next scene is the assembly of the whole court, all the main characters just about, the king, Claudius, the queen, Gertrude, Polonius, the chief advisor, the chamberlain, his son, Polonius's son, Laertes, about the same age as Hamlet, and they're all gathered to hear what the king is going to say. And the king comes on and he starts talking about how, although his marriage to Gertrude, his dead brother's wife, may seem a little quick, there's a good reason for it because the kingdom is threatened with war by Fortinbras and his list of lawless resolutes, and so they've got to put up a united front. So he has married his brother's widow, who used to be his sister, that is his sister-in-law, not literally his sister, and they've got married to show that the country is all united. There's no dissent here in the face of this threat of war. And everybody has agreed to this. So the king is explaining this, and here is his speech, where he comes on and he says, though yet of Hamlet, our dear brother's death, the memory be green, and that it us be fitted to bear our hearts in grief and our whole kingdom to be contracted in one brow of woe, yet so far hath discretion fought with nature, nature being natural sorrow, that we with wisest sorrow think on him together with remembrance of ourselves. Remembrance of ourselves means trying to keep the kingdom safe from the invasion of Fortinbras. Therefore our sometime sister, now our queen, his brother's widow, have we the imperial jointress to this warlike state, meaning the warlike, the cannon that they're manufacturing, the ships they're building, the arms they're buying. They're pretty warlike. They're preparing for war. And so that's why he's marrying his sister-in-law, which might, without the war and everything, be felt to be, kind of improper, not only to marry her, but to marry her so quickly after her husband, King Hamlet's death. Therefore, our sometime sister, now our queen, the imperial jointress to this warlike state, have we, as 'twere with a defeated joy, with an auspicious and a dropping eye, with mirth in funeral, and with dirge in marriage, in equal scale weighing delight and dole, taken to wife. Wow. The explanation here involves, I think, 7 or 8 of these antitheses, these contradictions, like a defeated joy. Defeated is the sorrow of the brother's death. The joy is the joy of marriage. With an auspicious, things are looking up, auspicious. An auspicious eye looks up. With an auspicious and a dropping eye, sorrowful, downcast eye, with mirth in funeral and with dirge in marriage. You see the defeated joy, the auspicious versus the dropping eye, the mirth in funeral, the dirge in marriage. These are contradictions, they're antitheses, and they're all about conflict in the heart. The joy is merged with the grief, the sorrow. And this is kind of paradoxical. So these things are not literal statements. They are poetic conceits. An auspicious and a dropping eye. Yeah, you could have one eye looking up, one eye looking down, signifying your mixed feelings. Yes, poetically, yes. But actually, you can't actually look up with one eye and look down with the other, literally. It's a poetic conceit. Just like mirth in funeral and dirge in marriage. I don't think they had, the jester, making jokes at the grave, nor do I think they had a dirge going when they went to the altar. But these are, again, poetic conceits. Well, you could say the marriage and the funeral, these things extend over time. People come from miles around to the marriage, and it's not just one day, it's over time. You can explain that a little bit, but they are kind of paradoxes. And he's saying that it's justified to put these two things together, and you've got to have them together because you've got to, overall, we've got to face the fact that we might be invaded by Fortinbras, and we've got to respond to that. So in equal scale weighing delight and dole taken to wife. Nor have we herein barred your better wisdoms, which have freely gone with this affair along. He's asked them for their best advice. This has been talked over. Do you think I should marry her? And he's been persuading people that this is a good course, that he should marry Gertrude, who he wants to marry anyway. And they all find this a pretty good argument, that, they've got to marry the widow of the dead king and demonstrate that Denmark is not split up, not in conflict, not in chaos or anything. Everything is together. The Danes are united. The Danish government is united. For all our thanks. Now he moves on to the business of the war, of the potential war, the threat from Fortinbras. He says, now follows that I'm going to tell you, young Fortinbras, holding a weak supposal of our worth, thinking we're weak, maybe because our king just died, or thinking, a weak supposal of our worth, thinking that we're weak, or thinking by our late dear brother's death, our state to be disjoint and out of frame, colleagued with this dream of his advantage, colleagued. It's like colleague, old word. You could have just replaced it with together. Together with this dream of his advantage, he wants to take over Denmark, or at least get the lands back that his father lost. Not all of Denmark, but at least those lands. He hath not failed to pester us with message importing the surrender of those lands lost by his father with all bonds of law to our most valiant brother. Here is the story again. Fortinbras of Norway, old Fortinbras, challenges old Hamlet to a single combat which will decide the fate of the disputed lands, and they make a treaty ahead of time, solemnly signed, establishing a lawful border forever between Denmark and Norway. So they won't go to war over these disputed lands anymore. They've been going periodically to war over them for a long time, probably. And so here is where holding land by force changes over to holding land by law. It's a progressive movement toward a peaceful state, a peaceful world, where everybody agrees on the legal borders. So, the lands lost by his father with all bonds of law to our most valiant brother. So much for him. So much for Fortinbras. Now for ourself and for this time of meeting. This is what we're going to do. Thus much the business is. We have here writ to Norway. They've written a letter to the King of Norway, who is Fortinbras's uncle, the brother of Fortinbras's father, just like Claudius, King of Denmark, is the brother of Hamlet's father, old Hamlet. Though Norway is not dead, he's still there, but he's impotent and bedrid. We have here writ to Norway, uncle of young Fortinbras, who, impotent and bedrid, scarcely hears of this his nephew's purpose. He doesn't know that Fortinbras is out there raising his own army of lawless resolutes to attack Denmark and get back the lands his father lost 30 years ago. 30 years ago, his father lost those lands in that duel, and they've had a legal treaty ever since. Fortinbras wants to go backward into taking lands by force. We'll take them. They're our lands, and blah, blah, blah. That's the old way, the old world. The new world, Fortinbras has not caught on to yet. The new world of law and respect for that treaty. We have written to Norway, he's impotent and bedrid, scarcely hears of this his nephew's purpose, to suppress his further gait herein, to keep him from going on with this. In that the levies, the lists, and full proportions are all made out of his subject. In other words, Fortinbras is raising an army, raising money, getting together cannon or whatever, all the stuff of war, out of Norwegians, finding them in Norway, and his uncle, the King of Norway, doesn't know about this. But Claudius does. He's got good spies. So Claudius writes to Norway saying, stop Fortinbras from this preparation for war. And we here dispatch you, good Cornelius, and you, Voltimand, to officers, to members of the nobility, as diplomats, you, good Cornelius, and you, Voltimand, for bearers of this greeting to old Norway. This is the letter I want you to take to Norway, asking him to stop Fortinbras from preparing for war. Giving to you no further personal power to business with the king, more than the scope of these dilated articles allow. Dilated means, expanded. Everything that says in this thing. That's not your... You don't have to worry about what else is outside, what else is going on. Just stick to this letter. Well, anyway. giving to you no further personal power to business with the king more than the scope of these delated articles allow. If you want to cut the play, you could cut those lines, because he could go from, for bearers of this greeting to old Norway, farewell, and let your haste commend your duty. See, he doesn't need those lines, but those lines contribute to the sense of him as king, giving to you no further personal power to do it. He's commanding, he's in charge. Claudius is the king, and he is in charge, and he's doing a pretty good job of acting the role of the good king. And then they say, Cornelius and Voldemar say, in that and in all things will we show our duty. We doubt it nothing. Heartily farewell, says the king, and they exit. So that takes care of the Fortinbras war business for the moment. I just want to mention the fact that Norway is impotent and bedrid. And yet he's asking him to contain Fortinbras. Norway still has the authority of the kingship. He's king of Norway. And yet, being so weak, if Fortinbras wanted to take his army of lawless resolutes and take over Norway and displace his uncle and make himself king, he has the arms to do it. Apparently, he is strong enough, if he wanted to do that. So now Norway is supposed to stop him from arming up to attack Denmark. So we'll see what happens. Now, the Cornelius and Voldemar have gone off to take the letter to Norway. And the king's next step, after they leave, is to say, and now Laertes, what's the news with you? Laertes, son of his chief counselor, his chamberlain, Polonius, wants to leave and go back to Paris. So he's asking the king's permission, as I guess high nobles have to. After all, you're threatened with war, and this guy is a mature young man of the nobility, and he doesn't want to stay here and prepare for war. He wants to go back to Paris and have a good time like he was. It's a little odd. But here we go. And now, Laertes, what's the news with you? You told us of some suit. What is Laertes? You cannot speak of reason to the Dane, the king of Denmark, and lose your voice. What wouldst thou beg, Laertes, that shall not be my offer, not thy asking? And then he goes on, the head is not more native to the heart. The head is not more native to the heart. The hand more instrumental to the mouth than is the throne of Denmark to thy father. What wouldst thou have, Laertes? The head is not more native to the heart, the hand more instrumental to the mouth. The head and the heart might be at odds, as we've just seen with this wisest sorrow. The wisest sorrow. The sorrow is in the heart, the wisdom is in the head, and they're kind of opposed. But here we have the hand more instrumental to the mouth. Everything is in harmony. Then is the throne of Denmark to thy father. What wouldst thou have, Laertes? And Laertes says, my dread lord, your leave and favor. Dread is powerful, in charge of my dread lord, my all-powerful lord. Your leave and favor to return to France, from whence, though willingly I came to Denmark to show my duty in your coronation, yet now I must confess that duty done, my thoughts and wishes bend again toward France. and bow them to your gracious leave and pardon. So, here's Laertes. War is threatening, but nobody seems to mind. He says, I want to go back to Paris, where I came from, to show my duty by attending your coronation. He says nothing about the funeral of old Hamlet. He says nothing about the marriage to Gertrude. It's just the coronation of the king. Very discreet. And the king says, have you your father's leave? What says Polonius? And Polonius, Laertes' father, says, he hath, my lord, wrung from me my slow leave by laboursome petition. And at last, upon his will, I sealed my hard consent. I decided to give him permission to go. I do beseech you, give him leave to go. And the king says, take thy fair hour, Laertes. Time be thine, and thy best graces spend it at thy will. But now, my cousin Hamlet and my son. So he's finished with Laertes, and now he comes to Hamlet. Sort of a little reversal, but for us it makes sense because he starts with Laertes, who is just a nobleman, and he moves on to Hamlet, who is the prince, who also wants to go back to where he was before the death of his father, the coronation, the marriage to Gertrude. He wants to go back to Wittenberg. The Germans would pronounce it Wittenberg, I guess, but Wittenberg is maybe the most famous university in Europe, and Luther started the Reformation there, but I think more important for Shakespeare's purposes, Dr. Faustus, who wanted to know everything, was a professor at Wittenberg. Wittenberg is a symbol of learning, the cutting edge of knowledge. And Hamlet has been hanging out there, going to classes. You go to lectures, people would go to lectures and they'd pay the professors who are lecturing. And Hamlet apparently has been going, as we find out later, to a lot of philosophy lectures. He is like a student of philosophy. He thinks a lot. And he's looking for truth. But now my cousin Hamlet and my son, he turns to him, and Hamlet says, a little more than kin and less than kind. Some take this as an aside because it might be insulting if he said it directly to the king. He means more than kin. My cousin Hamlet and my son. Cousin is kin. Son is kind, my own kind. That's really intense relation. An uncle is also a cousin. Anybody outside the immediate family, the extended family, they're all cousins in Shakespeare's meaning of cousin. A little more than kin and less than kind. My cousin Hamlet, kin, and my son, kind. He's not his actual son, is what Hamlet's saying. How is it, says the king, how is it that the clouds still hang on you? Hamlet says, not so, my lord. I am too much in the sun. Well, that could mean he doesn't like to be called the son of Claudius. He's getting too much of this sun stuff. But also it could mean too much in the sun. My eyes are open. Now I see the light. I see the truth of what's going on here. And I don't like it. But this is sort of veiled. And so the queen jumps in here and says, good Hamlet, cast thy nighted colour off, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark. Hamlet is dressed in black. He has a black cloak. He has black clothes. Mourning clothes. He's mourning for the death of his father. But as we learn, he's also mourning for the fact that Claudius, or that his mother has married Claudius, because Claudius is so much inferior to Hamlet's father. And besides, she was his sister-in-law, so this is incest. Well, what exactly incest is, and how soon after a widow loses her husband, she is, respectably permitted to marry. These are things that depend on the culture of where you are, on your family, and on yourself. There are people in every group who are on the far end of the spectrum, the puritanical end of the spectrum. And these people think, when your husband dies, some of them think you should never marry again. And you hear sometimes in literature and history, you hear women saying, my husband died, I will never marry. I will be faithful to him until death. And then there are others who are not at the puritanical end of the spectrum who think, well, my husband's dead, I'm going to get married again. The church was not exactly happy about many marriages, but it allowed them. The church is not going to be against marriage, so it will marry her again. Just like it married the wife of Bath to 5 husbands in Chaucer. So this is permitted, and everyone knows that being a sister-in-law is not literally being a sister, and yet that incest prohibition attaching to being a sister-in-law is there, faintly, at least, stronger for some people than for others. So, if they were to marry the day after old Hamlet died, everybody would go, what are you doing? That's horrible. But then as time goes by, it becomes less horrible and more acceptable. So what have we got, a month or so since King Hamlet's death? That's still pushing it a little, and yet, as Claudius has argued, because Denmark is threatened with war with Fortinbras, they're going to present a united front by him marrying his brother's widow. And the court accepts this argument. It pushes it a little, makes it seem a little improper that they're getting married so fast, that she was his sister-in-law, but it's not out of the question, and the war excuse helps make it okay. So Queen says to Hamlet, "Good Hamlet, cast thy nighted color off, and let thy eye look like a friend on Denmark." Yeah, the nighted color, the black clothes, the mourning clothes. He's mourning for his father, but this mourning, this black dress that he wears, is also aggressive. It is a subtle way of being critical of Claudius as the new king. Oh, I'm still mourning my father, the old king, he was so great. And Claudius, the new king, is not particularly happy that Hamlet is sort of thrusting his mourning in his face. He's mourning not only for his father's death, but for the marriage. So Claudius senses that this is antagonistic, this wearing of the black. And the Queen tries to persuade Hamlet to not wear those clothes anymore. "Good Hamlet, cast thy nighted color off, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark." See, they're connected. Keeping the nighted color on is critical, is looking at him as an enemy. You get rid of your nighted color and look like a friend on Denmark. Let's unite, she says. "Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust." walking around with eyes down here. Oh, my father. Seek for thy noble father in the dust. That's another poetic conceit. He's not really looking for his father in the dust. He just has downcast eyes because he's in sorrow for his father and for his mother's remarriage. But she says, do not forever with thy veiled lids hanging low. Seek for thy noble father in the dust. Thou know'st 'tis common. All that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity. Wow. Now there is a poetic line, passing through nature to eternity. It comes from the poet who wrote the play, Shakespeare. Just like he came up with all the antitheses that Claudius strung together as if he were a poet. Hamlet says, "Aye, madam, it is common." He doesn't like the word common applied to his father. "'Tis common, all that lives must die." "Aye, madam, it is common," as opposed to noble. He doesn't want his father and commonness to be put together, but his mother doesn't get it. She says, "If it be common, why seems it so particular with thee? It's common to everyone. Why do you have some different outlook? Why are you still mourning when death happens all the time? Why seems it so particular with thee?" Now Hamlet picks up on seems. "Seems, madam? Nay, it is. I know not seems. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother, nor customary suits of solemn black, nor windy suspiration of forced breath. Ah! No, nor the fruitful river in the eye, but tears pouring down, nor the dejected haviour of the visage, together with all forms, moods, shapes of grief that can denote me truly. These indeed seem, for they are actions that a man might play. But I have that within which passes show. These outward signs, black cloak, these but the trappings and the suits of woe. His outward signs of mourning can be put on by anyone, whether they're really sorrowful or not. And Hamlet is saying that his sorrow for his father is in his heart is true. He is signifying that he is sorrowful, and he really is sorrowful. But some people, he's implying, go around acting like they're sorrowful, and they're really not sorrowful. So Hamlet is again harping on his father's death and his own real sorrow for his father. And the king jumps in and puts a spin on this. "'Tis sweet and commendable." We say commendable, but he pronounces it commendable. "'Tis sweet and commendable in thy nature, Hamlet, to give these mourning duties to your father. But you must know," and here's death is common coming up again, "but you must know your father lost a father. That father lost his, and the survivor bound in filial obligation for some term to do obsequious sorrow." Obsequies were death rituals. "But to persever," different pronunciation again from persevere, "but to persever in obstinate condolement," he's getting into this thing. You are insulting us. You're being obstinate. obstinate condolement is a course of impious stubbornness. Impious, impious, we don't use the word much now, but impious stubbornness. 'Tis unmanly grief. It shows a will most incorrect to heaven, a heart unfortified, a mind impatient, an understanding simple and unschooled. Quite an insult to the Wittenberg student Hamlet. For what we know must be and is as common as any the most vulgar thing to sense, common and vulgar being associated with the death of Hamlet's father. You know, Hamlet doesn't like this language. Why should we in our peevish opposition, he's peevishly opposing Claudius, but he's opposing the tide of time, the natural flow of things with death. We can't be peevish about death. Death happens. Why should we in our peevish opposition take it to heart? Fie, 'tis a fault to heaven, a fault against the dead, a fault to nature, to reason most absurd, whose common theme is death of fathers, and who still means always, who still hath cried from the first course, the first corpse, the first person who died, the first course till he that died today, this must be so. We pray you throw to earth this unprevailing woe. It's good for nothing, this woe, because death happens. And think of us, the King of Denmark, as of a father. For let the world take note, you are the most immediate to our throne. And with no less nobility of love than that which dearest father bears his son, do I impart toward you. So think of us as of a father and get rid of this unprevailing woe and this obstinate, unreasonable mourning. For your intent in going back to school in Wittenberg, it is most retrograde to our desire. And we beseech you, bend you, change your course, bend you to remain here in the cheer and comfort of our eye, our chiefest courtier, cousin, and our son. It's quite a powerful plea. When the king says this to you, you don't say, well, no, I'm going back to Wittenberg anyway. So he has to agree, but his mother jumps in then to help him out. Let not thy mother lose her prayers, Hamlet. I pray thee stay with us. Go not to Wittenberg. And Hamlet replies, I shall in all my best obey you, madam. A last insult, since he is saying, I'll stay because of what you say, not because of this whole speech the king just made. But, that's, you can wiggle out of that if you want to, but that's the implication of it. However, the king, since Hamlet has agreed to stay, the king thinks, well, that's what I asked for, and he's agreeing to stay. And king jumps in to give it a spin. Why, 'tis a loving and a fair reply, says the king. Well, it's kind of an insulting thing to him, but he's brushing that aside and telling people this is what you're supposed to think. 'Tis a loving and a fair reply. After all, he agreed to stay here. Be as ourself in Denmark. In other words, you have all the authority you want. Well, it's a little exaggerated, but he's trying to be nice. Madam, come. This gentle and unforced accord of Hamlet He's had a lot of pressure on him. But this gentle and unforced accord of Hamlet, this is what everybody, oh, it was gentle and unforced. This is the public truth they're supposed to carry. This gentle and unforced accord of Hamlet sits smiling to my heart, in grace whereof no jocund health that Denmark drinks today, but the great cannon to the clouds shall tell, and the king's rouse the heaven shall bruit again, re-speaking earthly thunder, come away. The trumpets flourish, and everybody leaves except Hamlet, stays on the stage alone, and this is where his first soliloquy begins. I'll come to that next time. But this spin that Claudius gives it, a loving and a fair reply, be as ourself in Denmark, madam, come this gentle and unforced accord of Hamlet, sit smiling to my heart. You know, you'd almost think that this was what really happened. In grace whereof no jocund health that Denmark drinks today, but the great cannon to the clouds shall tell, and the king's rouse the heaven shall bruit again, re-speaking earthly thunder. They're going off to party now. The business is done, and Denmark might drink a jocund health or two, and he drains a flagon of Rhenish, and the cannons boom. Hey, the king just drained a flagon of wine. In grace whereof? Is this graceful? Is this something you'd call grace? No jocund health that Denmark drinks today, but the great cannon to the clouds shall tell. You got all these cannon that are being manufactured for war, and you're going to use the cannon to commemorate getting drunk? It is weird. But it's in line, as Hamlet later said, with the traditions in Denmark. Denmark has a reputation for being drunken, which is also weird because Hamlet's father was obviously not a drunk, and he did not go around, shooting off cannon whenever he took a drink. The cannon, the instruments of war, are now subsumed in Denmark's traditional drunkenness, supported by the king, who likes to down those flagons of Rhenish. Anyway, the king's rouse, the heaven shall bruit again, re-speaking earthly thunder. They'll shoot off the cannon, and the echo will come back from heaven, in grace whereof, to commemorate his getting drunk. So they all leave to start partying, leaving Hamlet behind to speak his first angry soliloquy. Well, I'll come to that in part 3.